So the news has been confirmed. Kevin Samuels passed away at 56 years old. Now, the first things first, condolences, right? Like to the people who were inspired by him, to the people whose life he had an impact on. You know, there's a lot of people who got married because of being exposed to the information within his content. And something I'm a big believer in is that the Manosphere has schisms. The primary schism that I believe that the Manosphere has is the looks, money, status, or comparative value guys versus the game. So it's basically, value versus game, right? That's an easy way to put it. One aspect of the Manosphere is more so dedicated towards trying to hold women accountable. And then the other aspect is more so for men to work on their game. So one aspect is more towards if you get to a place of financial worth, financial value, and social status, the looks, money, status, that you're going to have better experiences with women. And the other aspect is more so understanding the nature of sexual polarity, sexual attraction, dominance, and understand dominance and submissiveness, and just knowing how to operate with a woman in a way to do things in a way that benefits you, doing things on your own terms. So if you've heard me talk about Kevin Samuels before, something that I've been consistent about every time that I spoke about him is that I am a big fan of, and I really appreciate his general life advice, because he tells men, especially a lot of men who don't have fathers, I have a father. But he really reiterates some things, and he goes into details in some ways. Sometimes I haven't had those conversations with my father at times. And then there's also just aspects of his business advice that's just good business advice, right? I have to give him credit for that. But I haven't really looked at most of his dating and relationship advice seriously, because I'm on the other side of that schism when it comes to conversations about dating and relationships, right? But that does not mean that I do not see value that he brought to the Manosphere. Kevin Samuels is one of, if not the most prominently known member of the Manosphere. And I remember listening to Kevin Samuels back when he was more so an image consultant, when he was more so selling his products, and he was telling men, about how to improve their image, how to improve their style. And he would do like collaborations with one of my favorites, Alan Roger Curry, and people like that. And when he transitioned into more of the dating side, there was value that he added. And some of this value, it did kind of go backwards, I'll be honest with you, for some men. But at the same time, there was importance in it. There was value that was added. He gave voice to a lot of the frustrations of men, that men don't get to speak, or that men don't have the public platform, or is prominent enough a platform to say these things publicly. And a lot of men don't have the balls to say these things publicly, or not enough people listen to them for anybody to give a fuck. You get what I'm saying? Now, I will say, listen, I'm not a fan of the Eurocentric beauty standards at times, you know what I mean? I'm not a fan of the transactional mindset towards sex. I'm not a fan of that either. But something that I have to acknowledge. To me, Kevin Samuels was like Moses of the Manosphere, right? He was like Moses of the Manosphere. And that is both a compliment, but just an observation. Because, like, as a believer, I'm a Christian. I probably consider myself more of a mystic Christian. Not on some, I don't believe in God, or I don't believe in the Bible or nothing like that. I definitely do. But more so from an aspect of going into the etymology and understanding typology and being more wrapped up in the love and grace of God than the law itself. But if you notice the narrative of the Bible, it didn't jump straight to the grace of God. It didn't. It was there. But before you could get to that part where we get into the words of Jesus, before you get into the words of Paul, conversations about the grace of God, you have to understand that the law of Moses came first. And when Paul breaks down the law of Moses, he paints it as a mirror that's put up to the face of an individual who feels like they're self-righteous, who feels that they're already worthy based off of their works, to let them know that they don't meet up to those standards, right? Those self-righteous standards. Now, I'm in a space within the Manosphere where the focus is on game, it's on men holding ourselves accountable to our ability to get with women. And I'm not saying that Kevin Samuels never talked about those things. He would tell men to make sure that you're attractive. You know, he would tell men to make sure they're in shape. Sometimes there are some mixed messages on those things. But when I'm just talking about the general way that these things are viewed and the general ways that they're discussed, there are a lot of women who do have unrealistic expectations, unrealistic standards. And a big part of the value that he added often gets overlooked. He also spoke about, average people dealing with average people, having a regular life. He exposed a lot of the standards of people who were in corporate America. And corporate America, on a higher level, is going to be run mostly on a Eurocentric standard and a Eurocentric value system. You have to acknowledge that. And there's a lot of women who said that they want that type of man, they want that type of lifestyle. But based off of what they brought to the table, most of those men would not tell those women that they did meet up to those standards or why they didn't meet up to those standards. So there are some women based off of that, that value system who were already past the point where they could reach those standards. Maybe they were too overweight. Maybe, I personally prefer thick women, but for that type of man, because I'm not what Kevin Samuels will consider a high value man. So maybe this shit don't apply to me in the first place. But maybe too old outside of the generally understood childbearing years, which isn't always true, but there's some truth to it. And I mean, based on what conversation you'll have with a doctor. But he would expose these things. He would emphasize the importance of people going to therapy. He would just basically put the mirror in the face of entitled people. People would call into a show and say that this is what they want, this is what they deserve. And then he would paint that comparative value picture, put that mirror back in the face. Now, there were definitely times where he would walk people into goading out their entitlement, goading out their fantasy, and then tearing them down based on their fantasy by saying what they don't deserve. And that's not something I always agree with. But as far as giving voice to what a lot of men wanted, and there's something that he definitely did. We have to acknowledge that he's probably one of the biggest Manosphere people to go into the mainstream, or right on the cusp of being in the mainstream. And that has to be acknowledged. Oftentimes there's so much infighting in these spaces that people want to be against this, people want to be against that all the time. And there's a lack of being on code. There's a lack of people saying, okay, cool. We're all about men expressing what they want, expressing how they feel, expressing their thoughts, their perspectives on things. And not everybody's going to agree on everything, right? That's something to be understood. But I do think that there was value that he brought to the table, right? Now, the reason why I compare him to Moses is because I don't believe that the solutions that he gave are necessarily solutions that will always help people. But he exacerbated letting people know what certain problems were for what their value system was and what they said that they wanted. Right? And I think that's something that's important to do sometimes. And that's not necessarily my lane. My lane is more so, I'm a man with a program. If you're a man with a program, then you deal with women on the level of what you can deal with, but treatment is the most important thing. If what some people will consider a 10 treats you the best, that's who you deal with. But if a woman who is quote unquote a 7, or what they'll call an adjustable 7, she treats you well, that's how you deal with. and you deal with who can pick up what you're putting down. And when it comes to that, there's some issues along the lines of like, oh, a woman's a certain age. Yeah, if you're a man with children, that can be an issue. You know what I mean? And you can see that with different shows that come up, like Married at First Sight or like 90 Day Fiance. And a lot of these shows, the woman is much older in a lot of these couples. And then they have contention and the woman feels insecure because she knows that she either doesn't want to or is unable to have children. And she knows the man's probably going to eventually want children. He's trying to tell himself that he doesn't when he probably does. There's something you see a lot of. Or you'll see scenarios where, let's say, a woman may have children. And this isn't about the show, this is just in general. When you're a man that got a program, then typically when you're dealing with a woman, it's really about your game and whether or not she can pick up what you're putting down. So if she can pick up what you're putting down and she has children, hey, that's a woman who's on your program. If those children don't get in the way of her being on your program, then you're not really tripping about the kids. If she's a little bit older, but then that doesn't get in the way of her having the vitality to pick up what you're putting down, you attracted to her, she attracted to you, it's cool. I do see these different things from a little bit of a different perspective. But also, something that Kevin Samuels was doing was trying to encourage men to put themselves in a better financial position. I know I oftentimes don't talk about money as much because I don't believe that you need money to get casual sex. I don't. I think that's a tricky mentality. And a lot of his fans oftentimes are people who inadvertently have this tricking, hoeing mentality and don't even know it. It's acculturated prostitution. That's a phrase I got from Ron Wills. But beyond that, to be a man who wants a family, you need to have a certain amount of money. Maybe not the amount of money that he said you need to have, but to live comfortably and to live that aristocratic type of lifestyle, or at least to live comfortably in these major cities and to have a family and to not have financial stress. Then a lot of the things that he said were very important to understand. So, there's a difference between needing money to get some pussy versus needing some money so that you can provide for your family, especially the idea of wanting to have enough money so that if your woman or your wife is pregnant, that you can be able to take care of her. You know what I mean? I think that's something that's important to understand. And I just want to give flowers to Kevin Samuels for the work that he put in. That man worked very hard. And also understand that a lot of what built his platform is what people don't like him for. He didn't really blow up like that until he told the woman, listen, you're average at best. But he was putting in work before then. But what you got to understand is that he did take that route of, triggering the insecurities of women who failed at relationships. That's not necessarily my lane. But what he did is what brought eyes to his content. And there were things of substance that he wanted to say that went beneath the surface of what it generally viewed that he was talking about. And a lot of the sound bites that people twisted in turn to have a different perspective. And I know older men, like in my family, who listened to Kevin Samuels, and they were a big fan of his because they went through similar problems or they went through similar experiences with the entitlement of women in their age groups when they didn't feel that those women were entitled or were qualified for the things that they were asking for. So just from my perspective, I see what Kevin Samuels brought to the table of the Manosphere as important. I see it as something that was valuable. Not necessarily the methods that I agreed with, but a lot of things he said were things that resonated with me. A lot of things that he did and things he achieved were things that I look to and say, I like what he did. You know what I mean? And with that being said, just this understanding of Kevin Samuels to me being like Moses of the Manosphere is something that idea just resonates with me. Just resonates with me. Because before you realize A lot of times you have to go through a process. A lot of men won't realize that their financial success is not going to get them the type of treatment and relationships that they think it will until they're there. And a lot of women won't realize that the man that they're actually qualified for is probably not what they think that they're entitled to, right? A lot of people aren't going to realize that until they're hit with certain facts, they're hit with certain details, they experience these things, and they decide that they want to make some changes to their behavior, some changes to their lifestyle, go get therapy, heal, not be a bitter individual, man or woman, and not to feel entitled to things that you don't deserve, that you don't have the game to get. All right? Now, I don't believe in the whole bot cooperation thing. I don't. But I still see the value that Kevin Samuels brought to the Manosphere. And I just want to give him his flowers. You know, my apologies if, and typically I don't apologize, but the man did pass away. You know, if people feel like this was a little bit too negative, I still got to stick to my guns about the things that I stand for. But I have to acknowledge and give this man his flowers for what he brought to the Manosphere. So this is Coach Brody. I'm out.